Hey folks, Eric the old Jarhead here. So I've got this old pine log that I got to mill up. I'd felled it some time ago, and honestly, I can't even remember when I did. And after falling it, kind of sat around for a little bit, and it was kind of downhill from the cabin, and so it was in a real bad place. But I finally got it winched out and hauled up. And once I got it up, I was able to cut it down to about 19 and a half feet. And I was hoping to get about a 19-foot D log out of it. But unfortunately, as as time moves on, I wasn't milling for myself very much, and this log sat in the log deck entirely too long, and it had already been on the ground too long. So I decided rather than buck it in half and mill it that way, I would just go ahead and mill the 19 and a half feet into one bys, and I'll cut them in half later and cut them down to 8 footers or whatever I want later. At this point anyway, it's just as easy to mill it really as a 19 footer as it is two 8 footers. Though honestly, by myself, certainly easier to mill 8.5 footers over 19 footers. As you can see, it's pretty old, pretty blue stained. I was thinking I hadn't anchor sealed this one, but it looks like I did. I don't really see any checking on the end. I remember looking at the ends and thinking they were a bit checked, and I bucked one off, and the checking was very shallow. So I think I did it actually not long after it ended up on the log deck. And that is one of the challenges when you're a sawyer that runs a sawmill for other people, is you just don't get to spend as much time milling for yourself, and sometimes this happens. But the log may not make the best D-log in the world. However, it will make decent one by blue stain paneling or strapping or something. What do they say? Make lemonade out of lemons? Well, this one kind of turned into a bit of a lemon, and so I went ahead and just milled it up into one bys. As you can see, milling 19 and a half feet, it takes a little bit longer to run all the way down the mill, and you do have to make sure you get logs that are in that 19 and a half to 20 and a half feet range, set up on the mill right, so that by the time you get the head all the way back, you actually can drop the head. You can actually mill longer logs. I haven't personally had a need to, so I haven't done it. I always tell myself I'm going to try it one day, but I've seen on the forestry forum that I belong to, which is where I really learned almost everything I know. I've seen guys on there do it many times, and you mill 24, 25-foot beams on a 20-foot mill, and it just takes more work. But yeah, milling bigger logs like this one, it's not big in diameter, but it's certainly long. They just take longer. Now, the funny thing about this one, and one of the challenges of not cutting a log down that's like this one, is that when I go to pull the lumber off, I'm dealing with 19 and a half foot one bys that are going to flex a whole lot, like a bowstring. They're just going to bounce all over the place, and that's okay. That's fine. Like I said, we'll cut them down later, and sometimes that's just what you do. I will say one thing, it's really important to anchor seal your logs. If you don't, you're going to get cracking on the ends. We call those end checks. That's because the end of the log is going to dry faster than the rest of the log. And as it dries, it shrinks. And since the rest of the log hasn't shrunk, the ends start to pull apart, and that's what causes that checking. So make sure you get those ends sealed up. Latex paint is not the best to do that with. There are some great products out there like Anchor Seal, and Bailey's has a product, and I'll put some links down in the description so you can go down and check them out. It's absolutely the best thing you can do. And I will tell you, if you're going to have a sawyer come out, you have the sawyer come out right away if possible. You really don't want logs sitting on the ground and drying for a long period of time before the sawyer comes out. One misconception about sawmilling is that you should mill dry logs. It's a total misconception, and I think it comes from the woodworking world, where we always want to do our woodworking with dry lumber, right? We want it kiln dried. And while it's true that you should be woodworking with dry lumber, That doesn't mean that you should mill the lumber dry. What you really want to do is you want to mill it with the logs as wet as possible, as freshly felled as possible. And that's going to do a few things for you. One, it's going to make sure that the band stays cooler in the cut, and that actually helps quite a bit. When you're milling wet logs, the band is going to stay cooler, it's going to remain sharper longer, and so you're going to get more out of the band, which means more production out of the sawyer while they're running. If they're changing the band every hour, then you're losing production. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to allow you to control the drying of the lumber afterwards using the stack and sticker method, and that's going to give you the best lumber you can, really. If the lumber's all uniformly wet, fresh, green, whatever you want to call it, and the ends are sealed, then when you stack and sticker properly about every 18 to 24 inches and right out to the ends and evenly, nice and neat, that lumber is going to dry a lot better than if it's already dry, because now it's not drying anymore. So not only will it take the sawyer longer to do, and he's going to have to change the bands more often, but you can't control the drying as well because it's already done, it's drying. So it's just really important. Seal those ends, get that sawyer out as soon as you can. And another tip that I would give you is in your log yard planning. Always plan for the sawyer. Sometimes I've showed up on a job site and logs have been in 3 or 4 different places, and I charge $100 every time I move my mill. So if I show up on site and I park my mill in front of a log deck, and I get to milling and you say, oh, by the way, I got another log deck 100 yards over here for you, it's going to cost you $100 for me to move the mill over there. It's better that you have your logs all decked up nice and even. Big ends, that's the butt end of the log, the thicker, wider end of the log, all on the same side. Preferably have the logs together in the same length. So if you have 8-footers and 12-footers and 20-footers, have all your 8s together and all your 12s and all your 20s. And by that I mean, you can have your 8s in front of your 10s and your 12s, but just have them all together. You could have your 20s up front and your 8s in the back. But if you have them all together, then the sawyer's not constantly having to change from one length of log to another. Not that we can't do that, we can. But if you're running 8-footers all day long, let's say you've been running 8-footers for 3 hours, and then we roll up a 20-footer, well, that kind of throws a little bit of a loop. You got to think a little differently when you're milling 20-footers than when you do when you're milling 8s. And it just makes it more efficient. Keep the logs off the ground if possible. That's another tip I could give you. The best thing you can do really is put a couple 4x4s down, or even 2x6s, or even small logs, 4-inch diameter small logs down on the ground, and then put your mill logs on top of those. We call them runners. If you can do that, it'll make it easier for you to roll the log to the mill. And yes, I say you because that's another thing you can do. Always understand that when you're hiring a portable sawyer, it's like renting the sawmill but getting the sawyer for free. So you've got the sawmill out and you have someone who has time and experience and knowledge of running that sawmill and making lumber from your logs. And if you want them to be rolling the logs and hauling the lumber off the mill and bucking stuff up with a chainsaw, then they're not milling logs. And you're really wasting your money. I always tell people, you can pay me $100 an hour to run my sawmill, or you can pay me $100 an hour to off-bear the lumber for you. But you can't pay a kid $15 an hour to run my sawmill. However, you can pay the kid $15 an hour to off-bear. So which do you prefer? And I like to tell my customers, if I'm making sawdust, you're making money. Keep me making sawdust, that's the best thing you can do. So your site layout is really important, and I'm going to do a video just on site layouts. But as a tip, keep those logs together, keep the butt ends together, have them off the ground if possible. And honestly, buck the ends clean too. Don't have really muddy ends on your logs. If you've got muddy ends, you've got muddy ends, we'll deal with it. But if you can buck them clean, even just take an inch off the end of the log, maybe you've cut them at 8.6 and take them down to 8.4 right before the sawyer comes along. Having no mud on the end is going to actually help quite a bit too. So anyway, here we are. We're really getting this log down. I've milled it into a cant. Got a little wane there on the top, but that's okay. We're just taking it down into one bys. You can see there's a lot of blue stain in this guy, and that's why I decided to go ahead and just make a bunch of one bys out of it. You know, and talking about getting the most out of a sawyer that comes out, the most bang for your buck out of a portable sawyer, I would say that, you know, watching me mill this log kind of will point some of that out. You know, as I get through here, I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to decide, okay, I've got to get this stuff off the mill. And in this case, because I've got wane top and bottom, I'm going to have to roll this guy over so that I've got a nice squared up cant on the base and the wane will be up top. So to do that, that means I'm going to have to get rid of some of this 20-foot stuff. And I've got a tractor, so I can bring my tractor over and haul it out that way, but I still got to get it onto the tractor. And working alone, taking lumber off of a 20-foot log is a bit of a challenge, you know. Now I have some experience doing that, so you know, you'll see that I'm gonna flip it off, kind of roll it up onto the tractor, but I've got to do that with each piece, and then I've got to haul it over to the stack, the lumber pile over there that I'm going to stack and sticker at, and then I'm going to have to unload all of this 20-foot stuff. You can see it's pretty flexible. Park the tractor and get back to the mill. So I think that's a good demonstration of, here the mill is just sitting there not doing anything. It ain't making sawdust. And that's why you don't want your sawyer doing that. Now I'm doing this for myself here, so it's no big deal. And watch those hands. I love that. You know, a sawyer that's been running a mill for a long time, they just know where the controls are and which controls to use to do what. And you know, if you're a sawyer and you're watching this and you're not using your hydraulic log clamp to flip cants, give it a try. It's really amazing. I can flip cants to the left or to the right, move them, pick them up, move them around, flip them over. It's awesome. I love that hydraulics. Hey, you know, I ran an LT10 with no hydraulics. It was all manual by Armstrong. And so I love my hydraulics. Anyway, folks, I hope this video helped some folks out on how to get more bang for your buck out of a sawyer, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I will definitely take some time in the near future and do a video on site layout, site preparation, and how to get the most bang for your buck out of a portable sawyer, because I think that's important. I think it's really important to know you're going to have a guy like me come out, or a gal for that matter, come out and run that sawmill and turn logs into lumber for you. It helps to know what kind of things can you do ahead of time to make sure that you're going to get the best lumber you can at the best price you can get it. So stay tuned for that video. It's going to come out here pretty soon, I'm sure. In the meantime, if you like what you see, as always, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not watching. I think about 85% of you are not subscribed today, so I'd really appreciate it if you did. And hit that notification bell so you know when the next video comes out. I need my light. Well, no yoga pants. All right, folks, it's end of the day for me today. Just about 4:15. It's bourbon 30. Put a bit of wood through here. We spent about an hour. The last log alone was 180 board feet. So that was yield. I don't scale the logs ahead of time, frankly. I just figure out what I make out of them, and that's what I worry about when especially when milling for myself, but in general, I don't scale logs anymore. So we really took a whack at that pile of logs and got some of the junk out of there, and as you can see, we got this pile here. I got some over there. Some of the D logs were already there, but we added to it, and all that's new stuff. Anyway, it's time to clean up, pick up, and get down and have myself a bourbon 30. I think they call that child labor. But they call that having fun. Give a kid an ATV and a harrow and you end up with a really nice yard.